June 2010. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Elisa Samudio is 25 years old. She's a model, an aspiring actress, a woman with dreams bigger than the small town where she grew up. She has long dark hair, striking features, and a smile that lights up every room she enters. She's also a mother. Her son, Bruninho, is just 4 months old. And she's terrified. Because the father of her child is one of the most famous athletes in Brazil. A man with money, power, and connections. A man who doesn't want anyone to know about this baby. His name is Bruno Fernandes de Souza. But everyone in Brazil just calls him Bruno. He's the goalkeeper for Flamengo, one of the biggest football clubs in the country. He's on the national team. He's a hero to millions. And according to Elisa, he wants her dead. This is the story of a woman who fought for her child and paid the ultimate price. A story of fame, power, corruption, and a murder so brutal that it shocked an entire nation. But it's also a story about how easy it is to disappear when the person who wants you gone has everything to lose. June 4, 2010. Elisa Samudio leaves her apartment in Rio de Janeiro with her infant son. She tells her mother she's going to meet someone. She'll be back soon, she says. She's never seen again. Let's go back. To understand what happened to Elisa, we need to understand how she met Bruno. Elisa is working as a model in Rio de Janeiro. It's not easy. The competition is fierce. The pay is inconsistent. But she's determined. She goes to parties, networking events, places where she might meet people who can help her career. At one of these events, she meets Bruno. He's 24 years old, at the peak of his career. Flamengo's star goalkeeper. Handsome, charismatic, wealthy. Women throw themselves at him constantly. Elisa is beautiful. Bruno is interested. They talk. They exchange numbers. They begin seeing each other. But there's a problem. Bruno is married. His wife, Diane, has been with him since before he became famous. They have a daughter together. Bruno doesn't tell Elisa this at first. Or maybe he does, and Elisa doesn't care. The details vary depending on who tells the story. What's clear is that they begin an affair. For a few months, everything seems fine. Bruno takes Elisa to expensive restaurants. Buys her gifts. Makes promises. Then Elisa discovers she's pregnant. Everything changes. When Elisa tells Bruno she's pregnant, his reaction is not what she expected. He's angry. He tells her to get an abortion. He can't have another child. He can't let his wife find out. His career, his reputation, everything could be destroyed. Elisa refuses. She wants this baby. She believes Bruno will come around. That once the child is born, he'll accept his responsibility. Maybe even leave his wife and be with her. She's wrong. Bruno becomes aggressive. He calls her constantly, pressuring her. He offers her money to terminate the pregnancy. When that doesn't work, he threatens her. Elisa is scared, but she stands firm. In February 2010, she gives birth to a baby boy. She names him Bruno, after his father. Everyone calls him Bruninho. Elisa tries to contact Bruno. She sends him photos of the baby. She asks for financial support. She tells him he has a son, a beautiful, healthy son. Bruno denies everything. He tells people the child isn't his. He refuses to take a paternity test. He tells his friends and teammates that Elisa is crazy, that she's trying to extort him. But Elisa has evidence. Text messages. Photos. Proof that they were together. She decides to fight. In May 2010, Eliza files a legal claim for paternity and child support. She hires a lawyer. She's prepared to take Bruno to court, to force him to acknowledge his son. Bruno's response is calculated and cold. He invites her to talk. To negotiate. To work something out privately, away from lawyers and courts. Eliza, desperate and hoping for the best, agrees. It's the last decision she'll ever make. Eliza receives a call from someone in Bruno's circle. They say Bruno wants to meet. He's ready to discuss child support. He wants to see his son. He's willing to work things out. Eliza is cautious, but also hopeful. Maybe he's finally accepting responsibility. Maybe things will get better. She packs a bag for herself and Bruninho. She tells her mother, Sonia, that she's going to meet with Bruno's people. She'll be back in a day or two. Sonia is worried. She doesn't trust Bruno. She begs Eliza not to go. But Eliza goes anyway. She's picked up by a man named Luis Enrique Romeo, known as Macareo. He's one of Bruno's close friends. He tells Eliza they're going to Bruno's property in Esmeraldas, a rural area outside Belo Horizonte, about 450 kilometers from Rio. The drive is long. Hours pass. Eliza holds Bruninho in her arms, looking out the window as the city gives way to countryside. They arrive at a compound. A large property with high walls. Bruno's weekend retreat. Eliza is taken inside. What happens next is based on testimony from witnesses who were there. What they describe is beyond horrifying. Inside the property, Eliza realizes something is terribly wrong. This isn't a negotiation. This is a trap. Bruno is there, along with several of his associates. The atmosphere is hostile, threatening. They take Bruninho from her arms. Eliza screams, tries to fight, but she's outnumbered. According to later testimony from witnesses who were present, including Bruno's wife Diane and his cousin Luis Enrique Ferreira, known as Macareo Pequeño, what follows is a nightmare. Eliza is held captive. She's beaten. Tortured. They want her to sign documents. Papers that say Bruno is not the father. Papers that relinquish all her rights, all her claims. She refuses to sign. The torture intensifies. For hours, maybe days, Eliza endures unimaginable suffering. She's kept in a room. Barely fed. Brutalized. Her infant son is in another room, crying. She can hear him but can't reach him. Finally, they bring her a pen and the papers. She signs. She signs everything they want. Just to make it stop. Just to get back to her baby. But signing doesn't save her. Because Bruno and his associates have already made a decision. Eliza knows too much. She's seen too much. She can identify everyone involved. She has to disappear. The exact details of Eliza's murder vary depending on which witness testimony you believe. But the core facts are consistent and horrifying. After days of torture, a man named Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, known as Bola, is brought in. He's an ex-police officer. A man who knows how to make problems disappear. He's been hired to kill Eliza. According to testimony, Eliza is strangled. Some witnesses say Bruno himself participated. Others say he watched. Still others claim he ordered it but wasn't physically present. What's certain is that Eliza Samudio dies in that compound in Esmeraldas. She's 25 years old. The mother of a 4-month-old baby. A woman who wanted nothing more than for the father of her child to take responsibility. But the horror doesn't end with her death. Because now they have a body. And a body is evidence. They need to make sure Eliza Samudio is never found. What happens next is so grotesque, so disturbing, that when the truth eventually comes out, it will shock even hardened crime investigators. According to testimony from Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, Bola, he's given specific instructions. The body must disappear completely. No trace. No evidence. Nothing that can ever be found. Bola decides to dismember Eliza's body. He uses power tools. Saws. Knives. Working through the night in a room at the compound. Parts of Eliza's body are fed to Bruno's dogs. Rottweilers that he keeps at the property. Other parts are placed in bags and disposed of in different locations. Some are buried. Some are thrown into bodies of water. The goal is to ensure that Eliza Samudio ceases to exist. By morning, there's almost nothing left. Bola cleans the room. Disposes of his tools. Washes away the blood. As for little Bruninho, the 4-month-old baby, he's taken by Diane, Bruno's wife. She'll raise him as her own, she says. As far as the world will know, this child has no mother named Eliza. Bruno returns to Rio de Janeiro. Returns to his life. To football practice. To interviews. To his fans. He posts on social media. Smiles for cameras. Acts like nothing happened. Because in his mind, the problem is solved. Eliza is gone. There's no body. No evidence. No case. He's safe. Or so he thinks. June 7, 2010. 3 days after Eliza left Rio de Janeiro. Sonia Samudio, Eliza's mother, is frantic. She's been calling her daughter's phone constantly. No answer. She's contacted everyone Eliza knows. No one has seen her. Sonia goes to the police. She files a missing person report. She tells them about Bruno. About the pregnancy. About the threats. About how Eliza went to meet with his associates and never came back. The police listen. They take notes. They tell Sonia they'll investigate. But nothing happens. Because Bruno Fernandes de Souza is famous. He's beloved. He's a national football hero. The police aren't eager to accuse him of anything without solid evidence. And there is no evidence. No body. No witnesses willing to talk. Nothing. Sonia doesn't give up. She goes to the media. She tells reporters that her daughter is missing. That Brazil's famous goalkeeper is involved. Some media outlets pick up the story. But many are skeptical. Is this just a bitter woman trying to destroy a famous athlete's reputation? Is this about money? Bruno's lawyers issue statements. They say Eliza is unstable. That she's made false accusations before. That she's probably run off somewhere and will turn up eventually. Days turn into weeks. Eliza doesn't turn up. Sonia keeps pushing. She appears on television. She begs anyone with information to come forward. She demands that the police take her seriously. And slowly, very slowly, the police begin to investigate. They start looking into Bruno's associates. Into the property in Esmeraldas. Into the people who were last seen with Eliza. They discover inconsistencies. Lies. Suspicious behavior. And then, they get a break. One of the people present at the compound during Eliza's torture and murder is a young woman named Fernanda Castro. She's a friend of Bruno's wife, Diane. She was at the property when Eliza was brought there. She saw what happened. And she's terrified. 4 weeks, Fernanda stays silent. She's afraid of Bruno. Afraid of what he might do if she talks. But the guilt is eating her alive. She can't sleep. Can't eat. She keeps seeing Eliza's face. Hearing her screams. In late June, Fernanda makes a decision. She goes to the police. She tells them everything. About the kidnapping, the torture, the murder, the disposal of the body. She names names. Bruno, Macareo, Bola, Diane. Everyone involved. Her testimony is detailed, specific, horrifying. The police know this is credible. This is the break they needed. They begin building a case. They obtain search warrants for Bruno's property in Esmeraldas. They bring in forensic teams. They start looking for evidence. And they find it. Blood evidence. Despite the cleaning, there are traces. In the room where Eliza was killed. In the drains. Tiny spots that Bola missed. DNA testing confirms it's Eliza's blood. They also find surveillance footage from gas stations and toll booths showing Macareo's car making the trip from Rio to Esmeraldas on June 4, with Eliza visible in the vehicle. The case is building. But they still don't have a body. On July 7, 2010, exactly 1 month after Eliza disappeared, the police make their move. They issue arrest warrants. July 7, 2010. Police arrive at Bruno's apartment in Rio de Janeiro early in the morning. They have a warrant for his arrest. Bruno is shocked. He denies everything. He calls his lawyers. He insists this is all a misunderstanding. But the evidence is overwhelming. He's taken into custody. Within hours, the news explodes across Brazil. Bruno Fernandes de Souza, Flamengo's star goalkeeper, arrested for the murder of Eliza Samudio. The media goes into a frenzy. News channels cover nothing else. Headlines scream about the goalkeeper and the model. Photos of Eliza and Bruno are plastered everywhere. The public is divided. Some people believe Bruno is guilty. Others think he's being framed. Many can't believe their football hero could do something so monstrous. Over the next few days, more arrests are made. Macareo, Bola, Diane, Fernanda Castro, Macareo Pequeño. Everyone who was involved. One by one, they're brought in for questioning. And one by one, they start talking. Bola, the ex-cop who actually killed Eliza, decides to cooperate. He gives a detailed confession. He describes how he strangled her. How he dismembered her body. How he fed parts to the dogs. It's so horrific that even experienced detectives are shaken. Macareo also confesses his role in the kidnapping and torture. Diane admits she was present during the torture. That she helped hold Eliza down while Bruno beat her. The confessions are damning. But the prosecution has a problem. Without a body, without physical remains, the case is weaker. Defense lawyers can argue that Eliza isn't really dead. That she ran away. That these confessions were coerced. The police launch an extensive search of the property in Esmeraldas. They bring in cadaver dogs. Ground-penetrating radar. Forensic archaeologists. They dig up the entire compound. They drain nearby bodies of water. They search the surrounding forest. But they find almost nothing. Just tiny bone fragments. Not enough to definitively prove they're human, let alone that they're Eliza's. The investigation continues. The searches continue. But as weeks turn into months, it becomes clear. Eliza's body is gone. Destroyed. Lost forever. Before we continue this horrifying story, we want to hear from you. Where are you listening to this podcast right now? What time is it in your part of the world? Drop a comment and let us know. Your location and your moment matter to us, and we'd love to know where this story is reaching. March 2013. nearly 3 years after Eliza's disappearance. The trial of Bruno Fernandes de Souza and his accomplices finally begins in Contagem, Minas Gerais. The courtroom is packed. Media from around the world are present. This is one of the most high-profile murder trials in Brazilian history. Bruno arrives in handcuffs, wearing a suit. He's lost weight during his time in custody. He looks tired, older than his 28 years. The prosecution lays out their case. They present the testimony of Fernanda Castro, who witnessed the torture and murder. They present forensic evidence. Blood found at the property. Surveillance footage showing Eliza being driven to Esmeraldas. They present the confessions of Bola and Macareo, who admit their roles in the murder and disposal of the body. The evidence is overwhelming. But Bruno's defense team is expensive and skilled. They attack every piece of evidence. They question the credibility of the witnesses. They argue that without a body, there's no definitive proof that Eliza is dead. They paint a picture of Eliza as an unstable woman. A gold digger who got pregnant to trap a famous footballer. Someone who might have faked her own disappearance for attention or revenge. It's a cruel defense, and it's effective with some people. Bruno himself testifies. He admits to having an affair with Eliza. He admits she had a baby. But he denies ordering her murder. He claims he wasn't even at the property when she died. He says he's being framed. That his associates acted without his knowledge. That he's a victim in all this too. His testimony is calm, rehearsed, calculated. The prosecution tears it apart. They show text messages between Bruno and his associates. Messages that clearly indicate he knew what was happening. Messages that suggest he ordered it. They present testimony from Diane, his wife, who turned against him. She testifies that Bruno planned the whole thing. That he was present during the torture. That he participated in the violence. The trial lasts for weeks. Each day brings new revelations. New horrors. And throughout it all, Sonia Samudio sits in the courtroom. Eliza's mother. Now raising her grandson Bruninho, who was returned to her after Diane's arrest. She listens to every detail of her daughter's final days. Every description of the torture. The murder. The disposal of her body. She doesn't cry. She just listens. She wants the truth. She wants justice. Finally, after weeks of testimony, the trial concludes. The jury retires to deliberate. March 8, 2013. The jury returns with their verdict. The courtroom is silent. Tense. Everyone holds their breath. For Bruno Fernandes de Souza, guilty. Guilty of kidnapping. Guilty of torture. Guilty of murder. Guilty of concealing a corpse. He's sentenced to 22 years and 3 months in prison. Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, Bola, guilty. Sentenced to 22 years. Luis Enrique Romeo, Macareo, guilty. Sentenced to 15 years. Diane Rodriguez, Bruno's wife, guilty of kidnapping and concealing a corpse. Sentenced to 4 years. Others receive lesser sentences based on their involvement. The courtroom erupts. Some people cheer. Others shout in anger. Bruno's supporters can't believe their hero has been convicted. Bruno himself shows no emotion. He just stares straight ahead. Outside the courthouse, Sonia Samudio speaks to the media. She's exhausted but relieved. Justice has been served, she says. My daughter can rest now. But I will never have closure. I will never be able to bury her. I will never have a grave to visit. She's right. Despite the convictions, Eliza's body has never been found. She has no grave. No final resting place. But at least her killers are behind bars. Or so everyone thinks. Because in Brazil, the justice system has peculiarities. And Bruno's lawyers are about to exploit every single one of them. Immediately after the verdict, Bruno's legal team files appeals. They argue that the trial was unfair. That the media coverage prejudiced the jury. That the evidence was circumstantial without a body. They appeal to higher courts. State courts. Federal courts. The process takes years. Meanwhile, Bruno sits in prison. But not in the way you might imagine. In Brazil, there's a concept called prisão semiaberta, semi-open prison. It's for prisoners who show good behavior and meet certain criteria. In 2017, after serving less than 4 years of his 22-year sentence, Bruno is granted semi-open status. This means he can leave prison during the day to work and must return at night. He's essentially free for 12 hours a day. The public is outraged. Elisa's family is devastated. How can a man convicted of such a brutal murder be walking free after just 4 years? But it gets worse. In February 2019, Bruno is granted full release pending appeal. His lawyers argue that he's been in custody long enough while waiting for his appeals to be heard. A judge agrees. Bruno Fernandes de Souza walks out of prison. He's free. The man who tortured and murdered Elisa Samudio, who fed her body to dogs, who left her infant son motherless, is walking the streets of Brazil. The news spreads across the country. The outrage is immediate and massive. But Bruno doesn't hide. He doesn't show remorse. He doesn't stay quiet. Instead, he does something that shocks everyone. He tries to resume his football career. Bruno Fernandes de Souza signs with Boa Esporte, a second-division football club in Minas Gerais. The announcement triggers a firestorm. Women's rights groups protest. Sponsors threaten to pull funding. Players on the team refuse to play alongside him. But the club's president defends the decision. Everyone deserves a second chance, he says. Bruno has paid his debt to society. Except Bruno hasn't paid anything. He served less than 4 years of a 22-year sentence. He showed no remorse. He never helped find Elisa's body. He never apologized to her family. Protests erupt outside the stadium. People carry signs with Elisa's photo. Justice for Elisa, they chant. Murderers don't deserve second chances. The pressure becomes unbearable. Sponsors withdraw. The club's board meets. After just a few weeks, Bruno's contract is terminated. He tries again with other clubs. Some say yes. Each time, the public outcry is deafening. Each time, the contract is cancelled. Brazilian football officials eventually issue a statement. While they can't legally ban him from playing, they strongly discourage any club from signing him. Bruno's football career, it seems, is over. But he doesn't give up on public life. If anything, he embraces it more. He starts a YouTube channel. He gives interviews. He tells his side of the story. In these interviews, he portrays himself as a victim. He says he was young and made mistakes. He says the media destroyed his life. He rarely mentions Elisa. When he does, it's with no apparent remorse. He talks about how prison was hard on him. About how he suffered. About how he deserves forgiveness. He never talks about the woman he tortured and killed. The mother he took from a 4-month-old baby. The daughter Sonia lost. The interviews are painful to watch. His narcissism is on full display. His complete lack of empathy is chilling. But some people still support him. Some people still believe he deserves a second chance. It's a disturbing reminder of how fame and charisma can override morality in the public eye. While Bruno enjoys his freedom, his legal situation remains complicated. His appeals are still working through the court system. The Brazilian justice system is notoriously slow, and murder cases can take decades to fully resolve. In October 2019, a higher court upholds his conviction. But Bruno appeals again. In March 2022, another court affirms the guilty verdict. Bruno's lawyers file yet another appeal. This process could continue for years, possibly decades. Meanwhile, Sonia Samudio is raising Bruninho, now a teenager. The boy knows his mother was murdered. He knows his father killed her. The trauma of growing up with this knowledge is unimaginable. Sonia has sued Bruno in civil court for damages. She wants financial compensation for Bruninho's care and for the loss of her daughter. But collecting money from Bruno is difficult. He has debts. Legal fees. His football career is dead. He has little money to give. Sonia doesn't care about the money. She cares about accountability. About making sure Bruno never forgets what he did. She gives interviews. She speaks at women's rights events. She uses her pain to advocate for other victims of domestic violence. Because that's what Eliza was. A victim of domestic violence. A woman who was killed because she dared to demand that a powerful man take responsibility for his child. Sonia's mission is to ensure Eliza's story is never forgotten. That other women learn from it. That they recognize the warning signs. That they get out before it's too late. Chapter 16, The Missing Body. One of the most haunting aspects of this case is that Eliza's body has never been found. Despite extensive searches of the property in Esmeraldas, despite using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, despite digging up the entire compound, only small bone fragments were recovered. Forensic experts were unable to definitively confirm these fragments were human, let alone that they belonged to Eliza. The theory, based on Bola's confession, is that most of her body was fed to Bruno's Rottweilers. The dogs consumed flesh and bones, digesting almost everything. Other parts were allegedly disposed of in various locations. Buried. Thrown into water. Scattered. The result is that Eliza effectively vanished. There's no grave. No remains to bury. No place for her family to visit. For Sonia, this is an additional layer of trauma. She can't properly mourn her daughter. Can't say goodbye. Can't have closure. She's created a memorial in her home. Photos of Eliza. Candles. Flowers. A shrine to her daughter's memory. But it's not the same as a grave. Some forensic experts believe there might still be evidence at the property. That with newer technology, more remains could be found. But the property has changed hands. The new owners don't want constant excavations. They want to move on from the property's dark history. So Eliza remains lost. A ghost. A memory. A cautionary tale. But not a body that can be properly laid to rest. While Bruno gets most of the attention, it's important to remember the others who participated in Eliza's murder. Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, Bola, the ex-cop who strangled Eliza and dismembered her body, is serving his 22-year sentence. He confessed in detail to his actions, hoping for a reduced sentence. It didn't work. Luis Enrique Romeo, Macareo, who drove Eliza to the compound knowing she was being led to her death, is also in prison serving his 15-year sentence. Diane Rodriguez, Bruno's wife, served her 4-year sentence for kidnapping and concealing a corpse. She was released in 2017. She divorced Bruno while in prison and has tried to rebuild her life away from the spotlight. Several others received shorter sentences for various roles in the crime. Most have been released. What's striking is how many people participated in or knew about Eliza's murder and said nothing. There were at least 8 people at the compound during various stages of her captivity and murder. 8 people who saw what was happening. Some participated actively. Others stood by and watched. None of them called the police. None of them tried to help her. This collective guilt is part of what makes the case so disturbing. It wasn't just one man's crime. It was a conspiracy of violence involving multiple people who all chose to protect Bruno rather than save an innocent woman. From the moment news of Elisa's disappearance broke, the Brazilian media descended on the story like vultures. It had everything: a famous athlete, a beautiful model, sex, violence, mystery. It was sensational, and the media milked it for everything it was worth. But the coverage was often problematic. Many outlets initially portrayed Elisa in negative terms. She was called a gold digger, an opportunist, someone who tried to trap a famous footballer with a pregnancy. This narrative played into Bruno's defense. It painted him as the victim of a manipulative woman rather than a murderer. Only as more evidence emerged, as the brutality of the crime became clear, did the media shift its portrayal. Suddenly, Elisa was a victim. A martyr. A symbol of violence against women. The shift was jarring. The same outlets that had questioned her motives now celebrated her courage in standing up to Bruno. But the damage was done. The initial coverage had planted seeds of doubt in the public mind. Even during the trial, some people still believed Elisa was somehow to blame for her own death. This victim blaming is common in cases of violence against women, especially when the perpetrator is famous or powerful. The media's role in shaping public perception cannot be overstated. Their initial framing of Elisa as a villain rather than a victim made it easier for some people to excuse or minimize Bruno's actions. It's a lesson in how media narratives can influence justice and public opinion, sometimes with deadly consequences. Brazilian society's reaction to the Elisa Samudio case was deeply divided and revealing. On one side were those who immediately recognized the horror of what happened. Women's rights groups rallied around Elisa's memory. They held vigils. They protested. They demanded justice. They saw Elisa as a symbol of all women who are victimized by powerful men. Women who are killed for daring to demand accountability. On the other side were Bruno's supporters. And there were many. Some refused to believe he was guilty. They thought the evidence was fabricated. They believed he was being framed. Others acknowledged his guilt but argued he deserved forgiveness. Everyone makes mistakes, they said. He should get a second chance. This latter group was particularly disturbing to many observers. What kind of mistake is torturing and murdering someone? What kind of second chance should a person like that get? But Bruno had something powerful on his side: fame. In Brazil, as in many countries, football is more than a sport. It's a religion. Football players are gods. They're forgiven for behaviors that would destroy ordinary people. The fact that some clubs tried to hire Bruno after his release shows how powerful this cult of athletic celebrity can be. It also reveals something darker about society's willingness to excuse violence against women, especially when the perpetrator is someone they admire. The case became a litmus test. How you reacted to Bruno's crime revealed your values. Your view of women. Your understanding of justice. And Brazil, like the rest of the world, was shown to be deeply divided on these issues. Throughout this entire saga, there's one person whose voice is often forgotten: Bruninho, Elisa's son. He was just 4 months old when his mother was murdered. Too young to remember her. Too young to understand what happened. He was initially taken by Diane, Bruno's wife, who planned to raise him as her own. But after the arrests, he was returned to Sonia, his maternal grandmother. Sonia has raised him ever since. She's given him as normal a life as possible given the extraordinary circumstances. But how do you give a child a normal life when his father murdered his mother and the entire country knows about it? Bruninho grew up seeing his father's face on TV, in newspapers, online. He grew up hearing the story of his mother's death told and retold in graphic detail. Sonia has tried to protect him from the worst of it. But in the age of the internet, it's impossible to shield a child completely. As Bruninho entered his teenage years, he had to grapple with impossible questions. Who is he? Is he his father's son? His mother's legacy? Something else entirely? Sonia has told him about Eliza. About how brave she was. How she fought for him. How she loved him even though she only got to be his mother for 4 months. She's shown him photos. Videos. Everything she has to help him know his mother. But it's not enough. It will never be enough. Bruninho will carry this trauma for the rest of his life. The knowledge that his father killed his mother. That he exists because of a relationship that ended in horror. Therapists who work with children of murdered parents say the trauma is profound and lasting. These children often struggle with identity, trust, and relationships throughout their lives. Bruninho is now a teenager. Reports say he's doing well in school. That he's well adjusted given the circumstances. That Sonia is doing an incredible job raising him. But the scars are there. Invisible but permanent. He's the forgotten victim of this case. The one who will live with its consequences longer than anyone else. The Eliza Samudio case exposed multiple systemic failures in Brazilian society and its institutions. First, there's the failure of the justice system. Bruno was released after serving less than 4 years of a 22-year sentence. How is this possible? Brazil's criminal justice system has provisions for early release, semi-open prison, and release pending appeal. These provisions are meant to prevent indefinite detention and allow for rehabilitation. But when applied to violent offenders who show no remorse, they become absurd. Bruno got to walk free while his victim remains literally vanished. Second, there's the failure of law enforcement. When Sonia first reported her daughter missing and named Bruno as a suspect, the police were slow to act. Why? Because he was famous. Because accusing a beloved football star requires overwhelming evidence. This preferential treatment for the wealthy and famous is a problem worldwide, but it's particularly acute in Brazil. Third, there's the failure of the football establishment. Even after his conviction, some clubs wanted to hire Bruno. They prioritized winning over morality. They cared more about his goalkeeping skills than about the woman he murdered. This reveals how deeply sports culture can corrupt values. When athletic ability trumps basic human decency, society has a problem. Fourth, there's the failure of media responsibility. The initial portrayal of Eliza as a gold digger rather than a victim influenced public opinion and potentially even the investigation. Media outlets have a responsibility to report facts, not perpetuate stereotypes about women who dare to hold powerful men accountable. Finally, there's the failure to protect women from domestic violence. Eliza had reported Bruno's threats before her death. She'd told people she was afraid. But no protective measures were in place. How many women like Eliza are out there right now, threatened by powerful men, afraid to speak up because they know the system won't protect them? The case is a mirror reflecting multiple societal failures. And until these systems change, there will be more Elizas. The Eliza Samudio case gained international attention, particularly after Bruno's release and attempted return to football. International media covered the story extensively. News outlets in Europe, North America, and Asia reported on the Brazilian goalkeeper who murdered his girlfriend. FIFA, football's international governing body, was pressured to take a stance. Women's rights organizations demanded that Bruno be banned from professional football worldwide. But FIFA maintained that individual clubs and national associations make their own decisions about player eligibility. they wouldn't issue a blanket ban. This response disappointed many advocates who felt that FIFA had a moral obligation to prevent a convicted murderer from profiting from the sport. Some international clubs received offers to sign Bruno. All declined, citing moral concerns and public relations nightmares. The case also sparked discussions about violence against women in sports more broadly. Football culture, with its machismo and celebrity worship, often enables abusive behavior by players. From Ray Rice in the NFL to various football players in Europe, there's a pattern of athletes receiving light consequences for violence against women. The Eliza case became part of this larger conversation. It was an extreme example, but it highlighted the systemic issues present worldwide. International human rights organizations also weighed in. Amnesty International mentioned the case in reports about violence against women in Brazil. The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women cited it as an example of systemic failures. The attention was helpful in keeping pressure on Brazilian authorities to maintain Bruno's conviction and prevent his complete rehabilitation in public life. But it also turned Eliza's tragedy into a spectacle. Her death became a talking point, a case study, a hashtag. Some worried that the international attention was more about sensationalism than genuine concern for justice. Regardless, the case remains one of the most internationally recognized examples of femicide in Latin America. Tragically, Eliza's case is not unique. Violence against women, particularly when perpetrated by powerful men, is a global epidemic. In Brazil alone, a woman is killed every 2 hours. Most of these murders are committed by current or former partners. Many of these cases involve famous men. Athletes, politicians, celebrities who use their power and resources to escape consequences. The case that most closely parallels Eliza's is that of Angela Diniz, a Brazilian socialite murdered by her boyfriend Doca Street in 1976. Doca was initially acquitted after his lawyers argued she deserved it due to her sexual behavior. Public outcry led to a retrial and conviction, but he served minimal time. That case, nearly 50 years ago, sparked feminist movements in Brazil. Yet here we are, decades later, and Eliza's story shows how little has changed. Internationally, there are similar cases. Nicole Brown Simpson in the United States. Reeva Steenkamp in South Africa. Countless others whose names aren't known because their killers weren't famous. What these cases have in common is a pattern: powerful men who feel entitled to control women's bodies and lives. Women who resist and pay with their lives. Justice systems that fail to protect them. Societies that question the victims rather than the perpetrators. Eliza's case is both unique in its brutality and depressingly common in its dynamics. The fact that her body was never found adds an extra layer of horror. But the underlying story, a woman killed for demanding accountability from a powerful man, is told thousands of times each year around the world. Until societies fundamentally change how they view women, how they hold powerful men accountable, and how they respond to domestic violence, there will continue to be more Elizas. That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this case. It's not an aberration. It's a symptom of a much larger disease. As we near the end of this story, we want to connect with you one more time. Wherever you are in the world right now, whatever time of day or night you're hearing this, leave us a comment. Tell us where you are and what time it is for you. These stories transcend borders and time zones, and we want to know where Eliza's story has reached you. As of 2024, here's where the main figures in the Eliza Samudio case are. Bruno Fernandes de Souza remains legally free while his appeals continue through the court system. He's attempted multiple comebacks to football, all met with public protests and sponsor withdrawals. He maintains a low profile but occasionally gives interviews where he continues to portray himself as a victim. He's now in his late 30s, his prime years as an athlete long gone. He shows no public remorse for what he did to Eliza. Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, Bola, is still in prison serving his 22-year sentence. He's eligible for parole in the late 2020s. Unlike Bruno, he confessed fully to his role in the murder and has expressed remorse, though whether that remorse is genuine or strategic is debatable. Luis Enrique Romeo Macareo is also still serving his sentence. He's eligible for early release soon based on Brazilian law. Diane Rodriguez, Bruno's ex-wife, was released after serving her sentence. She's remarried and lives a quiet life. She's given no interviews about the case since her release. Sonia Samudio continues to raise Bruninho, who is now a teenager. She remains an advocate for victims of domestic violence. She gives interviews on important anniversaries related to the case. She's written about her experience and works with women's organizations. Her life is dedicated to Eliza's memory and to preventing other women from suffering the same fate. Bruninho is now in his teens. He's reportedly a good student and well-adjusted despite the impossible circumstances of his origin. Details about his life are kept private to protect him. He knows what happened to his mother. How he'll process this trauma as he becomes an adult remains to be seen. Fernanda Castro, the witness whose testimony was crucial to the convictions, entered witness protection after the trial. Her current whereabouts are unknown. She received death threats from Bruno's supporters and had to essentially disappear for her own safety. The property in Esmeraldas where Eliza was murdered has changed hands several times. Current owners have tried to distance it from its dark history. But locals still know it as the place where Eliza died. It's a reminder that some places are permanently scarred by the violence that occurred there. As for Eliza herself, she remains missing. Her body was never found. She has no grave. No final resting place. She exists now only in memory, in photos, in the stories her mother tells her son. She's forever 25. Forever the young mother fighting for her child. Forever the victim of a brutal crime that shocked a nation. The Eliza Samudio case left an indelible mark on Brazilian society and beyond. In the years since her disappearance, her name has become synonymous with violence against women, particularly violence perpetrated by powerful men who believe they're above the law. The case led to some legal reforms in Brazil. There's been increased focus on domestic violence prevention. Better training for police officers on handling reports from threatened women. Stronger laws protecting victims. But these changes came too late for Eliza. And they're not enough. Women in Brazil still die at alarming rates. Powerful men still often escape consequences. The case also exposed the dark side of sports celebrity culture. The willingness of some clubs to hire a convicted murderer showed how morality can be sacrificed for athletic success. This has led to more scrutiny of athletes' personal conduct. More pressure on sports organizations to hold players accountable. It's a small shift, but it's something. Perhaps most importantly, Eliza's case became a rallying cry for feminist movements in Brazil and Latin America. Her photo appears at protests against femicide. Her name is chanted at demonstrations. She's become a symbol of all the women killed by men who claimed to love them. Sonia has ensured that Eliza's story is told and retold. She's kept her daughter's memory alive through advocacy work, interviews, and her dedication to raising Bruninho with knowledge of who his mother was. But there's a tragedy even in this legacy. Eliza didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to be a mother. She wanted to raise her son. She wanted to pursue her career. She wanted to live. Instead, she was murdered at 25, her body destroyed, her life reduced to a cautionary tale. The question we're left with is, what has her death accomplished? Have we learned anything? Has society changed? The honest answer is, not enough. Women are still killed by partners at horrifying rates. Powerful men still often escape justice. Fame still provides a shield against accountability. The systems that failed Eliza continue to fail other women every single day. But her story endures. It's told in podcasts like this one. In documentaries. In books. In conversations between mothers and daughters about the dangers women face. And maybe, just maybe, every time her story is told, it saves someone. Maybe a woman recognizes the warning signs in her own relationship. Maybe she gets out before it's too late. Maybe she lives because Eliza died. That's not justice. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. Eliza Samudio was a real person. A daughter. A mother. A woman with dreams and hopes and a future that was stolen from her in the most brutal way imaginable. She deserves to be remembered not just as a victim, but as a person who fought. Who stood up to a powerful man and demanded he take responsibility. Who loved her son enough to risk everything. Her body may be gone, but her story remains. And as long as we keep telling it, as long as we refuse to forget, Eliza Samudio will never truly disappear. Thank you for listening to this difficult story. If it affected you, if it made you think, if it made you angry, good. That anger is necessary. That discomfort is important. Share this story. Talk about it. Use it to start conversations about violence against women, about power, about justice, about how we can do better. Subscribe to our podcast for more true crime stories that need to be told. Leave us a review. And most importantly, if you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship, please reach out for help. There are resources available. You don't have to face it alone. Eliza didn't get out in time. But you can. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop demanding justice.
Rain falls on Kitakyushu tonight, just as it did on that February morning in 2002 when neighbors noticed something was wrong. The Ogata family home stood quiet, too quiet, on a residential street where children usually played and housewives exchanged morning greetings. But on this day, the silence felt different, heavier, like the air itself knew what lay inside those walls. What the police would discover when they finally entered that house would shake Japan to its core and reveal a darkness so profound that even veteran detectives would struggle to comprehend it. Before we step through that door, before we see what they saw, there's something you need to understand about the man who orchestrated this nightmare, a man whose methods were so insidious that his victims never even tried to escape. If you're listening from Tokyo, Osaka, or anywhere across Japan, the United States, Canada, the UK, or anywhere else in the world, it's just past midnight now, the perfect time to settle in with these dark truths that your textbooks never taught you. Before we continue, if you're finding this case as compelling as I am, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into true crime's darkest corners. His name was Futoshi Matsunaga, and by the time authorities connected him to the Ogata family, he had already perfected his technique over nearly 2 decades. But the truly horrifying part, the detail that makes this case unlike any other, is that Matsunaga never physically restrained his victims. He never needed to, because what he did to their minds was far more effective than any chain or lock could ever be. The neighbors had noticed the Ogata family becoming more reclusive over the past year, their once vibrant household growing dimmer, quieter, isolated. They attributed it to normal family troubles, perhaps financial stress or illness, the kind of private struggles that polite neighbors don't inquire about too deeply. They were wrong. Inside that house, a psychological horror was unfolding that would ultimately claim 7 lives, but not through quick violence. No, these deaths would come slowly, methodically, through a process of systematic dehumanization that turned family members against each other until they became both victims and perpetrators. When police finally forced entry on February 18, 2002, they found only one survivor, a 17-year-old girl who weighed barely 30 kilograms, her body covered in scars, her eyes hollow with trauma that would take years to even begin processing. She was the daughter, the one who had endured everything, witnessed everything, and her testimony would eventually expose one of the most disturbing criminal minds in modern Japanese history. But to understand how this happened, how an entire family could be systematically destroyed from within, we need to go back to where it all began, back to 1981, when Futoshi Matsunaga was just a young man with a mobile phone business and a talent for reading people's weaknesses. But first, there's something else you need to know about the house itself, something the police noticed immediately that made them realize this wasn't just a crime scene, this was a laboratory. And what do you think they found in the bathroom that made even hardened investigators turn away? Futoshi Matsunaga was born in 1961 in Kitakyushu, the same city where his crimes would later unfold, and from an early age, he demonstrated an uncanny ability to manipulate those around him. His childhood friends would later describe him as charming and persuasive, the kind of person who could talk his way into or out of anything. But beneath that charm lay something colder, a calculating intelligence that viewed other people not as humans but as instruments to be played. By his early 20s, Matsunaga had already begun experimenting with the psychological techniques that would define his later crimes. He would identify vulnerable individuals, usually women, befriend them, seduce them, and then slowly, methodically, begin to isolate them from their support networks. His method was elegant in its simplicity. He would start with compliments and attention, making his target feel special, seen, understood in ways they had never experienced before. Once emotional dependence was established, he would introduce small criticisms, tiny seeds of doubt about their friends, their family, their own judgment. These criticisms would grow, becoming more frequent and more severe, until the victim began to believe that Matsunaga was the only person who truly understood them, the only one who could help them navigate their inadequacies. And then, once they were completely isolated, completely dependent, he would introduce pain. For those of you listening in London, the United States, Canada, Tokyo, Osaka, or anywhere around the world right now, it's early evening, that quiet time before the city settles into night, and you might wonder how someone like Matsunaga could exist in modern society, how his victims could be so thoroughly controlled without anyone noticing. But that's the genius of psychological torture. It leaves no visible marks, at least not at first. If this story is gripping you the way it should, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on your notifications. Your support helps us bring you more cases like this one. The pain started small, always a pinch, a slap, nothing that would leave lasting evidence. But it was the context that mattered. Matsunaga would frame the violence as deserved punishment, as necessary correction for the victim's failures. He would make them repeat phrases acknowledging their wrongdoing, make them thank him for caring enough to discipline them. Over time, the victims internalized this logic. They began to believe they deserved the punishment, that they were fundamentally flawed, and that Matsunaga's violence was an expression of love, of his commitment to making them better. This is called coercive control, a pattern of behavior designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting their resources, and regulating their everyday behavior. And Matsunaga had mastered it years before psychologists even had a name for it. By 1982, Matsunaga had already victimized multiple women, draining their bank accounts, destroying their relationships, and discarding them when they no longer served his purposes. But he wanted more. He wanted complete control, the kind that wouldn't end when the money ran out or when the victim became too damaged to be useful. He wanted a system, a self-sustaining cycle of abuse that could continue indefinitely. And then he met Junko Ogata. Junko was different from his previous victims. She was stronger-willed, more intelligent, more capable of seeing through his manipulations. But that only made her more appealing to Matsunaga, because if he could break someone like Junko, if he could turn her into his instrument, then there would be no limit to what he could achieve. Their relationship began in 1982, and for the first few years, it followed his usual pattern: seduction, isolation, gradual escalation of control and violence. But Junko resisted in ways his previous victims hadn't. She fought back. She questioned. She tried to leave multiple times. So Matsunaga adapted. He realized that to truly control Junko, he needed to give her someone else to control, someone weaker, someone she could dominate in the same way he dominated her. This would serve two purposes. It would satisfy Junko's need for agency and power, making her less likely to rebel against him, and it would implicate her in his crimes, binding her to him through shared guilt. The psychological term for this is forced perpetration, where victims are coerced into harming others, creating trauma bonds that make escape psychologically almost impossible. And that's when Matsunaga made his most diabolical decision, a plan so twisted that when it was finally revealed in court, even the prosecutor struggled to explain it to the jury. because who would believe that a man could convince a woman to help him torture her own family to death? In 1985, Matsunaga identified his next target, and this time, he chose someone even closer to Junko, someone whose suffering would bind Junko to him more completely than anything he had done before. He chose Junko's own family. The Ogata family consisted of Junko's parents, Shizumi and Takashige, her younger sister Riko, and Riko's 2 children. They were a normal middle-class family, hardworking, close-knit, the kind of people who never imagined they could become victims of the horror that was about to consume them. Matsunaga's approach was patient and methodical. He began by ingratiating himself with the family, presenting himself as Junko's devoted boyfriend, a successful businessman who could provide for their daughter. He was charming, generous, attentive, everything parents hope their daughter will find in a partner. Over months and years, he became a fixture in their lives, someone they trusted, someone they welcomed into their home without reservation. And all the while, he was studying them, learning their weaknesses, their fears, their pressure points. By 1996, Matsunaga had convinced the Ogata family to let him move into their home, ostensibly to save money while he expanded his business. This was the crucial step because once inside, he could begin the real work of dismantling their family structure and rebuilding it with himself at the center. He started with Takashige, Junko's father, a proud man in his 60s who had worked his entire life to provide for his family. Matsunaga began to undermine Takashige's authority through subtle means, questioning his decisions, offering better alternatives, positioning himself as the more capable problem solver. At first, Takashige resisted, but Matsunaga was patient, and he had Junko's help, whether she fully understood what she was doing or not. If you're in New York City, Los Angeles, Toronto, London, Tokyo, or anywhere else around the globe right now, it's late afternoon, that golden hour before sunset, and you might be listening to this on your commute home, surrounded by thousands of people, and it's worth remembering that horror doesn't just happen in isolated places, it happens in ordinary homes, on ordinary streets, hidden behind ordinary facades. Take a second to subscribe if you haven't already, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. It really helps us continue investigating cases that deserve to be told. The isolation of the family began gradually. Matsunaga convinced them that they were being cheated by their relatives, that friends were taking advantage of them, that the outside world was hostile and dangerous. He controlled their finances, monitoring every expense and criticizing any spending he deemed unnecessary. He controlled their communication, screening phone calls and letters, ensuring that their contact with the outside world flowed through him. And slowly, inexorably, the Ogata family's world shrank until it consisted only of their house and the people inside it. Then came the violence. It started with Takashige. Matsunaga accused him of disrespecting Junko and demanded an apology. When Takashige refused, Matsunaga slapped him across the face. The shock of this moment cannot be overstated. In Japanese culture, the respect for elders is paramount, and the idea of a younger man striking an elder, particularly in his own home, was almost incomprehensible. But what happened next was even more incomprehensible. Matsunaga forced Junko to participate, to join in punishing her father for his disrespect. And she did. Whether through fear, through her own internalized abuse, or through the twisted logic Matsunaga had instilled in her, Junko struck her father. This was the turning point, the moment when the family's destruction became inevitable, because once that line was crossed, once family members could be made to hurt each other, Matsunaga could construct his system of mutual degradation. He introduced a rule: anyone who broke the household rules would be punished, and everyone else would participate in that punishment, or they themselves would be punished. This created a cycle where everyone was both victim and perpetrator, where guilt and trauma bonded them together in a way that made escape psychologically impossible. The punishments escalated. Physical beatings became routine. Electric shocks were introduced. Matsunaga had rigged up a device that could deliver painful jolts, and he would use this on family members for infractions as minor as speaking without permission or making eye contact without being told to do so. Food was restricted, with family members sometimes going days without eating, and when they were fed, it was often scraps or deliberately disgusting combinations designed to humiliate. Sleep deprivation was constant. Matsunaga would wake family members at random hours to confess their wrongdoings, or to participate in punishment sessions. But the physical abuse, as horrifying as it was, wasn't the worst part, because what Matsunaga did next would ensure that even if the family wanted to escape, even if they somehow found the courage to run, there was something that would make that impossible, something that would trap them more effectively than any lock or chain ever could. And can you guess what psychological technique he used to make his victims police themselves? Matsunaga's true genius, if such a word can be applied to something so evil, lay in creating a system where the victims controlled themselves and each other, making his constant presence unnecessary. He called it the confession system, and it worked like this. Every family member was required to confess their bad thoughts and actions every day, no matter how minor. These confessions were written down and reviewed by Matsunaga and Junko, who would then determine the appropriate punishment. But here's the crucial part. If one family member failed to report another's transgression, both would be punished, the original offender for the offense and the witness for failing to report it. This system turned the family against itself. Parents informed on children, siblings betrayed siblings. Everyone became both warden and prisoner in a panopticon of mutual surveillance. Trust, the foundation of family bonds, was systematically destroyed and replaced with suspicion and fear. Family members began to over-report, inventing or exaggerating transgressions to demonstrate their loyalty to Matsunaga, knowing that being seen as complicit was more dangerous than being seen as a victim. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. Research on thought reform and coercive control shows that when people are forced to repeatedly confess to crimes or moral failures, they begin to internalize the guilt, their sense of self becomes eroded, replaced by the identity that the confessor assigns to them. In the case of the Ogata family, they began to genuinely believe they were bad people, fundamentally flawed and deserving of punishment. And because everyone in the house shared this belief, there was no one to challenge it, no alternative reality to cling to. For those listening in Sydney, Melbourne, Vancouver, Chicago, Manchester, Osaka, or anywhere you're tuning in from, where morning is breaking and a new day begins, it might be hard to imagine how this could happen, how educated adults could be so thoroughly controlled. But that's the power of environment. When everyone around you confirms the same reality, when there's no external reference point, that reality becomes truth, no matter how distorted it might be. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to stay updated on our investigations into the darkest corners of true crime. By 1997, the Ogata family had been living under Matsunaga's control for over a year, and the physical evidence of their abuse was becoming harder to hide. Family members had lost significant weight. Their bodies bore scars from repeated beatings and electric shocks, and their behavior had become noticeably strange, withdrawn, fearful, submissive. But Matsunaga had prepared for this. The family had been so thoroughly isolated that there was virtually no contact with the outside world. The few times neighbors or distant relatives inquired about them, Matsunaga had prepared scripts, explanations about illness or family troubles that satisfied curiosity without inviting intervention. The confession system evolved to include more elaborate punishments. Family members were forced to torture each other in increasingly creative ways, with the understanding that failure to inflict sufficient pain would result in even worse punishment for both the reluctant torturer and their intended victim. Matsunaga would sometimes leave the house for days, leaving Junko in charge, and the system would continue to function in his absence, a testament to how thoroughly he had internalized his control in each family member. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case, revealed later through the survivor's testimony, was the way Matsunaga used intimacy and affection as weapons. He would occasionally show kindness to a family member, offering them food or relief from punishment, and this intermittent reinforcement, this unpredictable alternation between cruelty and kindness, created a psychological dependency known as trauma bonding. Victims in such situations often develop intense emotional attachments to their abusers, viewing the rare moments of kindness as proof that the abuser really does care, that if the victim could just be better, the abuse would stop. The family's living conditions deteriorated progressively. They were confined to smaller and smaller areas of the house, eventually restricted to a single room where they slept on bare floors with minimal bedding. Hygiene was controlled and restricted, bathing was rare and supervised, waste removal was humiliating and regulated. The house itself became a physical manifestation of their psychological prison. with each room representing a different level of degradation and control. And then in late 1997, something happened that would transform this case from psychological torture into murder, because one family member, pushed beyond the limits of human endurance, made a decision that would seal the fate of everyone in that house. But who was it, and what did they do that made Matsunaga decide death was the only solution? Takashi Jogata, Junko's father, had endured nearly 2 years of systematic abuse by late 1997. The proud man who had once been the head of his household had been reduced to a shell, beaten, starved, and humiliated beyond recognition. But somewhere deep inside, some spark of his former self remained, some small ember of resistance that Matsunaga's techniques hadn't quite extinguished. And that spark would prove fatal. The exact nature of Takashi's defiance remains unclear. Different accounts suggest different triggers, but what's certain is that indice